Hello friends. Today's video is kind of a continuation of a video that I did earlier this month on word count. And in that video we talked about whether you should track it, kind of what your book should look like. I wasn't necessarily focused on giving you parameters on how big your book should be or how small, but a few questions were raised and I want to dive into this a little bit more. But I also want to take the opportunity when talking about word count and how large or small a memoir should be to really dial into how you hit that desired length if you have a particular goal in mind or you're kind of going with industry standards, how you hit that length without all the fluff. This can kind of go both ways. There are some writers who are long-winded, they have no problem getting words on the page, but a lot of them are kind of low value. They are distracting, they're passive, they're fluffy, it's just jumbly and clunky, and you can't get into the story and feel the pace of it and the energy of it because all these extra words are floating around out there. Some writers are more reserved in their approach. They hold back. They have shorter clip sentences. Sometimes that really works, but sometimes you feel like things are missing. So we're going to dive into this. This might be a little bit of a longer video. I don't know, I never know where this is going to lead, but this is actually a really important topic, and I'm so thankful that you guys brought up some additional questions on this that allowed me to really segue into giving you this guidance. So let's just kind of get this straight here. Based upon my experience and my research of the current industry here, if you are looking to follow a traditional publishing path, word count may be a little bit more important. You may want to give yourself more of a solid goal and really watch that and pay attention to where your memoir is hitting. And again, there's really no hard rule, but I will say that most traditional publishers have some general guidelines, or they've published books that are more in the same area. So looking at kind of common, more popular memoirs out there, you're looking at something around 60 to 120,000 words. 120,000 words is quite a thick book. Some stories really just nail that home. They are deeper, thicker stories, and they require more words. Some stories really don't. And to give you some parameters, I would definitely push to make sure that your book is above 40,000 words. A memoir is a story. It's not a self-help book. I want to take this tangent a little bit, if you will, to kind of give you the logic behind word count. Imagine yourself in the self-help aisle. You're looking for something to help you with losing weight. Okay, we'll just go with that. You don't want to read 100,000 words to give you the tools and tips and tricks and all of that to help you lose those pounds. You're like, I want to get in, I want the goods, and I want to get out. So self-help or personal development books, the other nonfiction books, if you will, they tend to be much lighter on word count because you're not going super deep. I mean, there may be books that need to go super deep. For example, Tim Ferriss doesn't seem to write a book that falls into any word count guidelines, but he goes deep in many, many areas, kind of in a broader sense. He's a little unique, but in a general sense, think of it like that. Your story requires room to breathe. You have to let things out and air them out and give them their time in the light. So more words is not necessarily bad, and less words isn't necessarily bad, but definitely keep your book above the 40,000 word range. If you're struggling with that, there may be something a bit more behind that challenge that you need to investigate. So if this is your first book, 40,000, definitely don't dip below that, but I usually aim and I push my clients to hit somewhere around like 75 to 80,000 words. That seems to be a happy middle, a very digestible amount of words. And I've really never heard of anyone saying this book is too long or too short. 80,000 words is something we've all probably read and doesn't seem to be like droning on and on and on. Now that actually brings me to my next point. The real question here is, if you're aiming around 80,000 words, again, I'm just going to kind of use that for purposes of our video today, then how do you get there without feeling the pressure to fluff it up with a bunch of filler words? How do you get your story written without taking that long way around and stuffing it full of stuff that just doesn't belong? A bunch of backstory or low value tangents or, in the legal field, in my former life, it was, why say something in 10 words when 5 will do? It's not about being short and clipped. It's about being succinct and efficient and always using the best words possible in every sentence and in every paragraph, etc. So at the end of the day, the publisher is going to care less about your actual number of words. If your book is written well, succinct, tight but not skimpy, descriptive but not fluffy, engaging but not over the top and theatrical, unnecessarily theatrical, I should say. And at this point, you're probably going like, that's super great, Danielle, but how do we do that? So that is where we're going next here on the crazy train. And that really is the trick. That's the thing that you kind of, as a writer, will start understanding a little bit more as you're practicing and writing more and more. But here's the thing I want you to always keep in mind. Your book must contain only what is required to tell your story effectively. Let me say it again. Your book must contain only what is required to tell your story effectively. No more, no less. It's again, definitely a bit of an art form, but following a strong outline will definitely help you rein this in and extract what is needed. So here's the measuring stick that I want you to use to ensure that you're doing the no more, no less magic spell here. This is the measuring stick I want you to stick up against your story and say, is it too much? Is it too little? Where do I need to fill? And how do I fill this in? Or how do I take some out? How do I cut? The measuring stick is called the reader's journey. Now, we probably talked about this a little bit when you identified your ideal audience and the struggle that your reader is kind of dealing with when they come to your book. In my head, the journey that a reader goes through is something like this. Point A to point B, okay? It's like a little path through the woods, a little jaunt through the woods, okay? Point A to point B, you're taking them on a journey with you. You've probably heard me say, like, when we talked about the story arc, the arc of change. That's what this is, the arc of change. Your readers are starting over here, and then your book takes them another place, and there is a change, maybe within them, or at least a change in their perception. The change may be just in how they perceive your story, but hopefully you're kind of influencing a change in their life. That's a different note. So let's go back to this reader's journey. It's the path that your readers travel through your book. They start at a very, I hit my microphone. They start at a very distinct place, and they end up at another very distinct place. Now, I want you to disregard time here. This has nothing to do directly with your timeline of your story. It's not like they must travel for years, right? Your timeline is something different. It's not relevant here. It still matters, but it's not relevant here. Let me explain. When your reader first picks up your book, she, and I again use the feminine pronoun here, the female pronoun, she is looking to gain something. She's at a certain point in her life. She's at a certain place, a particular situation, a particular age, a particular area of growth, if you will. So today, think about what your life looks like right now. For example, today I am a single mom of 4. I'm struggling to balance that with growing my business and also having a personal life as a single woman. So I might, as a reader, go out and look for a memoir that speaks to some of those things. Maybe it's a story of a mom who was in a similar position and built this grand business and went through these motions of becoming this amazing, successful businesswoman and finding the love of her life, and her kids are just amazing, and she lives happily ever after, right? So stay with me here. I know that's like this big fairy tale, extravagant fairy tale that you probably will find in very few books. But at the beginning of that book, I, the reader, am at a very particular place. I am single, I'm struggling with balance, and I'm trying to figure out my place as maybe a partner and find someone to be my partner in this whole thing, right? So I'm kind of in this area of transition. But I desire to be in another place, point B. I desire for you to take me on this journey in your book to point B. That is my journey as a reader. And I think of it like you are the author and you're taking my hand and you're saying, come along, Danielle. I'm going to show you how I went from this single mom who is struggling to balance her parent and business and personal life. And I'll show you how I traveled this journey to get to the end of my story, which is fairy tale land. So that is the focus that I want you to always come back to. That's the mindset and the ruler that I want you to come back to when you think about your reader's journey, how they travel through your book, and the real question here is, how are you taking your readers from point A to point B, and what are the things that you need to share with them in order for them to gain the value of your story? So in my example, what does that author need to share with me to help me learn how she balanced all of that and how she came to find her true love and live in fairy tale world? What are those things that she has to explain to me and share with me and show me and describe that really help me take that story in? She could take one paragraph and literally sum up her entire book, right? We kind of all can do that. I can be like, hey, I'm a single mom of 4 and I run a business. And that's like a sentence. So how do you make one succinct sentence or paragraph into an entire book? That expoundment, I think that's a word. You guys can Google it for me if you want. I always like to make up words and make them mine. So side note. Okay, so let's get back into this. The important thing is to remember that not everything belongs in your book. We've talked about that before. And not everything that does belong needs to be a big thing. There are so many small moments that add up to those little cobblestones that your reader will like travel on down the yellow brick road on their reader's journey through your book, okay? They don't have to be these big giant things. It's not just, I had a kid, I started a business, I did the thing, I got divorced. Those are the big moments. And remember, those are those big dips and, declines and inclines on your story arc. Those are those big high notes and low notes and maybe, some couple steps in between. But it's really those things that happen between those big moments, those highs and lows, that help us travel along with you. Remember, we're going on a journey. It's one step ahead of the next, one foot in front of the other. You cannot climb a mountain if you don't continue to take one step at a time. So you have to really understand that small moments bring big value sometimes. So your story arc might outline all of those big moments, but those in-between moments that aren't necessarily on your story arc are really what I'm talking about when I say the small things. They're these flashes of time, these little bits. It's not like, giving us literally everything you do every day or something like that. But when you start inserting these small little incidences in your story, of course, you'll see the word count grow. And these moments are not fluffy, okay? They are not filler. They're important. They're the glue that holds those big moments together, because we can't just jump from big moment to big moment to big moment and feel like we got a whole story, right? You have a lesson to teach us, and you need to make sure that the value behind that lesson is let me say this again. The lesson that you're teaching us the value of that lesson is found in the way that you already had walked that path. You already traversed those struggles and you climbed that mountain. You did all of this, and you get to teach us what you did, and you get to show us what you went through, so we don't have to do that. We don't have to struggle. You're saving us that struggle. But if we don't understand what that looks like, it's not going to be very meaningful and very valuable. We aren't learning those lessons firsthand because we didn't travel your footsteps, but you're able to impart that wisdom and that value to us as your reader. You're able to insert those small moments to really help us connect to you as a human and really feel into those universal truths, those moments, those small daily moments that we all have. So think back to my mom example. You know, I'm the struggling single mom who is running her own business and trying to kind of do the parenting thing, but also trying to do the business and the personal life and all of that, right? So those are big things. Those are big moments that if you're writing this book, you have dealt with and you have conquered things in every area, most likely, right? But think of those little moments. That mom in that story, for example, me at the end of the day, when I read my babies a story and they fall asleep leaning on either side of me with their little heads snuggled up next to me, and just I get to feel their warm little bodies as their breath slows down and as they get lulled to sleep by my voice reading them this just ridiculous story. It's just such a moment of peace and bliss. And for me, it's like that, it's all worth it moment. It's all worth the hard work. I'll figure it out at some point, right? So is this a big moment? No, not at all. This happens every night. No night is really memorable enough for me to say, hey, this deserves a high point on my story arc. But these moments are what unite us. How many of you moms can relate to that? Can relate to that one particular moment and feeling into how that just gives you that sense of all of my hard work will be worth it or is worth it. So all moms know those moments. That's kind of my point. That's why those little moments matter, and they shouldn't be overlooked. Now, again, this is a judgment call. You really have to know yourself and know your readers in order to understand those little moments that count and what should go in your story and what shouldn't. So the lesson for today is solidly planted in the gray area. And the message I want you to take away is those small things add up to big word counts. It's not the fluff. It's not the extra descriptions. It's those small moments. So in order to go big on your word count, you got to go small. That is the lesson for today. Please let me know what you think about this and whether or not it's something that you're struggling with or you have a good example of. I want to hear your good examples. And then we'll keep going.